Oh.
Yep.
All right, so opening banter time, story time with Daniel.
So we've been kind of deep diving in both King Arthur and adjacent to that, Wizard Knight of late, and really enjoying that space. Where in Wizard Knight you've got
the knightly space.
The knightly space. There's a lot of dueling. There's also, there's a man's best friend. Did you guys know in the year 1400 in France, a splendid duel was fought by a suspected murderer and a dog.
Hell yeah!
Like a dog.
Like a greyhound.
So an actual physical dog.
I have my hopes about which way this fight is going to go. Please carry on.
So
was it jousting?
Yeah,
yes, it was. It was actually. It was actually a joust. So the Chevalier Marquer killed Aubry de Montdidier in the forest of Bondy, which is near Paris, and buried the body. And the only witness was Montdidier's greyhound. The dog went back to a friend.
Oh, I thought
where
the
he
dog's
whined and
name was
scratched at the
Montdidier.
ground.
Yeah.
No.
So the dog lassied?
The dog lassied in the year 1400.
The dead body?
The dead body said recovered. And then shortly thereafter, it met up with Macaire and attacked him viciously. 3 men had to pull him off. The dog was otherwise gentle and amiable in general, but it kept on trying to attack Macaire no matter when it saw him. This was reported to the king, who decided it was definitely an accusation and arranged for a single combat trial.
The king is like,
this
is 100% an accusation. Like, I've heard accusations before, but this is one. This is from the dog's mouth.
Yep, 100%.
100% accusation.
And then the fight took place on the Isle of the Notre Dame in Paris. Macaire with a lance and the greyhound with his natural weapons. The dog sprang on the man with amazing ferocity and clamped its teeth around the throat and couldn't be shaken off. And Macaire screamed and said he'd confess if they'd pulled the dog off.
Fuck yeah. What was the dog's name?
The dog's name is not known. Okay. Which is crazy.
It's probably like Sally or something.
And in contemporary eyes, this proved the justice of duels. and trial by combat.
Well, here's to le bon chien.
Yes, the greyhound.
We love you. You're our hero for sure.
This led me down a rabbit hole. I have more stories of dogs solving murders, but we can save it for another day.
Oh my God,
like
that's incredible.
I feel like at the end of that, I would arrive at the same conclusion. Like, man, this trial by combat thing, this thing
works.
Is legit.
This totally
works.
This
100% works. We got it. We solved it.
We
Case
all
closed.
know if someone comes by and your dog growls, that person's a pedophile.
Yep.
For sure.
Dog wins.
Yeah.
Yep.
Welcome, everyone. Mike Govanen to the Undertowers podcast. I'm Steven.
I'm Daniel.
Oh, we got the confetti early, boys.
Oh, yeah.
We can wrap it up now.
We've got a great episode for you tonight. We are going to be discussing our 5 favorite authors or our God Hand of authors.
God Hand. You've heard of Mount Rushmore, but the next step is the God Hand of authors.
The God Hand. Is this overdramatic? Yes. Is it silly? Yes.
Well,
yes, it is Undertowers.
There's one more. Because it's a hand. So there's 5.
There's 5. Yeah. One more than 4.
We're going to be doing 7 because there are 2 names that we're doing separately because otherwise we would all have the exact same top 2. But before we get to that, I only have one piece of news for you guys tonight, and it's I do want to preface this very seriously. This is not news in the sense of like an actual reputable news source. This is a rumor. Apparently, Sir Ian McKellen.
So it's fake news.
Sir Ian McKellen said in an interview recently that he had heard. So again, this is pure hearsay. That the upcoming Hunt for Gollum film is actually going to be films.
Yes, I saw this as well. 2 films.
So the Hunt for Gollum.
Yes. So we're going to turn 3 pages into 2 movies.
Less than 3 pages.
We're talking
paragraphs.
200 million box office, baby.
I am. Oh, we got balloons now too. I am assuming that we're including parts of the Council of Elrond stuff. Is my guess.
I guess. Okay.
I mean, there's probably going to be it's Sauron in time, right? Like maybe Sauron's gonna
Maybe.
come in.
Okay, so
It's Sauron in time.
More Lord of the Rings, awesome. More Jackson, Lord of the Rings, awesome. I'm trying not to overreact because again,
Let's
to
overreact.
say this again and again and again. This is not.
I think
for sure.
This is an entertainment podcast. Overreact.
At this point, it's an appropriate reaction.
This is
too much.
It's the same mistakes.
My reaction is, I'm pretending it's not there. 2
is too much. I'm down with the movie. I think that they have all of the pieces in place for it to be very cool and a lot of fun. I am concerned because this is Warner Brothers.
Yep.
Warner Brothers was behind kind of the 3-movie bloat for the Hobbit films. I think that the original 2-film plan would have served the Hobbit movies much better.
It would have.
And that it was the greed of Warner Brothers forcing it into a 3rd film. And I can easily see that happening again because they don't learn their lessons about anything. No franchise does Warner Brothers have where they learn their lesson.
They do make their money, and that might be why.
Well, for now.
Yep.
But we're seeing stuff get canceled left and right. And so who knows? Yeah. So I don't really know what more to say about it. 2 movies is too much. It's too much for this story. It's too much.
I will wait and reserve complete and total judgment, but it just does sound really bad. And honestly, the more I've thought about it, I'm happy for characters to return to roles. We're also kind of at the point. I mean, Andy Serkis accepted because of motion capture. I'm also at the point where it's like we probably just need new actors doing some of this stuff. I don't know if 90-year-old Ian McKellen is really him doing this as his final role is very moving, but it's almost time to turn the page.
Well, again, we talked about this when in the episode when this movie was first announced. I don't know that this is on the table, but I think it would be really compelling since Gollum is presumably the main character of the film for Gandalf and Aragorn to very much be in it, but to be these kind of shadowy monster horror movie kind of things.
Although honestly, if they do that for the movie, that sounds like such a bad time.
I
do not want to hang out with Gollum for 6 hours.
I don't want to hang out with him ever. I don't think that this. I think that this is a very bad idea.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm just gonna jump on ship with Bernard Hill now. I mean, he's passed.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
He said Rings of Power is a money cash grab, plain and simple. And everything I've seen from it, I can't help but agree with the guy.
And it feels like this. It feels like the same thing.
This feels even worse. At least the source material for Rings of Power has a whole kind of book and lore, and they also have space to we could actually create something out of this because there's nothing written down. This is a sentence.
Yeah.
In the mid,
it's tough.
I don't see it becoming good at all. I like to see swords on screen, but
reserving judgment. But
yep.
The
no hope.
slightly serious rumor of
I
2
would rather
films
see
makes me
season
nervous.
2 of The Acolyte than watch this movie.
Hey, hot takes.
Wow.
Coming in hot. All right, so that's our quote unquote news for this segment. But before we get to our Godhand of authors, a word from our sponsor.
Okay. We have a
set
new.
my drinks aside.
We have a new great sponsor today, and I think it's timely. It's timely and needed. Are you having a hard time finding love? Does your lover love another? Well, Merlin's shape-shifting lover service is here to turn you into that lover that loves another. Just don't reveal that you killed them already. That way...
Is that part of the enrollment process?
Yes. That way, you can get what you want without consequences and skirt the numerous consent laws in the state of California.
So this is only valid for Los Angeles residents.
This is a tried and true way to conceive an heir. And that's all they submitted to us.
What was the name of the company?
Sorry, Merlin's Shape-Shifting Lover Service.
Merlin's
Shape-Shifting Lover Service.
Lovers or
Merlin's Lovers
Service.
Lovers Service or Lover Service?
Lovers Service.
Yes.
As always, code Undertowers for 10% off your first shapeshift.
They did say you can refer to some some on-hand examples of their work. Look at Uther Pendragon and the Lady of Shalott, Elaine, for examples of the ways you can get what you want doing through their services.
But,
Super sketchy magic.
Yes,
you kill them and then you become them.
in Uther's service, he.
You know what? I don't need to get it.
Yeah. And
fine.
with that,
It's fine.
we're going to start talking about some of our personal, very favorite authors of all time.
Hooray.
Before we get into that, I don't know if you had any, Sam, but Daniel, you and I had a couple honorable mentions that don't quite make the list because of just having to choose 5. Do you want to go first, or
So I really just have. I would really.
I have one.
I think I just have one honorable mention, based on our discussion, but that would be C.S. Lewis.
Good call.
Completely deserving to be, in the Godhand, with so many amazing, works and writings. But I tried to also make my Godhand like, the way I'm thinking of it is mine right now, and who is most speaking to me and kind of at that pinnacle, while also leaning on my past and my history. And so like C.S. Lewis is definitely like of my childhood and of all time. And if I had to go, if I really tried to big picture it, he might move somebody out of place, but he's he'd be my honorable mention.
Favorite work?
Favorite work is probably it's a toss up between Out of the Silent Planet and Paralandria, and I might just go Paralandria. Probably that would be his Baelit, which failed. So it's a failed Baelit.
Failed Baelit, but close.
Yeah, which a Baelit for the uninformed is
Which
the
we
little
also
creepy,
don't really know, but
creepy little face that
egg.
comes together. That when the eclipse comes, you can ascend to being a member of the Godhand if you have the right one.
Yep.
So these books are their anchors into the extra world, and so that's where we're going.
think of it as like a hybrid lottery ticket. It's like
but a creepy face tier.
Sam, do you have any extra honorable mentions?
yes, mine is okay. Mine is J.K. Rowling.
Yep.
Sure,
Honorable,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Simply because she got everyone in our generation to read again. When we were 10, maybe you guys were 11 or 12, but got us all.
I was actually 15. I started late.
I'm saying
I was
when
late
it
too.
started.
Yes.
She
You're
got us
correct.
back.
Yep.
It was her and the guy who wrote Captain Underpants, who is not an honorable mention, but he was definitely a book that I saw all the time at the same time I saw Sorcerer's Stone.
Interesting.
But no.
I think it was something Armstrong wrote Captain Underpants.
That sounds right.
Should we
I'm
put
not
that
sure.
in our reading list?
Yeah, we'll add that.
For sure, we'll get
really-
rid
We
of
can
it.
add it to
Really
our. It
easy
can be a
reads.
manga.
So I've
It's
got
anime.
3 honorable mentions here.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
First of all is Brian Jakes, the author of the Redwall series.
I thought it was Jacques.
It's Jakes.
That sounds better.
He's from Liverpool. But Brian Jakes. These books, it's epic fantasy, but very little magic and with anthropomorphic animals. My favorite book being Lord Brocktree.
Is that the otter dude?
No, it's the badger. The badger
yeah,
lord.
Yeah.
So he had a massive impact on me. I adored those books as a kid, and it's been such a delight to be reading them again with my own kids. Next up is another childhood favorite that I've also read again this year with my kids is Lloyd Alexander, the author of the Chronicles of Prydain. My favorite of which, as I've mentioned previously on the show, is Terran Wanderer. This is book 4. This book it touched me in such a profound way as a child, and again as a 35-year-old man. Absolutely phenomenal writer. And then a modern author, Mr. John Gwynne. My favorite book of his being Wrath, the final book of Faithful and the Fallen. John Gwynne ticks all the boxes for me. I love the characters that he writes. I love the action that he writes, and the very heartfelt stories that he tells. I enjoy thoroughly. So those are my honorable mentions. Now,
great ad, and he's super hot too, John Gwynne.
Absolutely, absolute stud.
Like on a scale of 1 to Henry Cavill, like
he's up there. Now, when we were discussing these lists originally, we realized very quickly that we were all going to have the same top 2 authors. So we have separated them out, and we're going to talk about them now. So this is separate from our Godhand. These are above the Godhand. Mm-hmm. These are
the most high and most.
I think they probably would have been one would have been the ring finger, and the other may have been the index. Maybe, I don't know.
But the first of which,
your rating system is
someone that we've been discussing quite a lot recently, and will continue to. So you better just get used to it. Is the man himself, Mr. Gene Wolfe?
Yes.
Mr. Pringles.
You've heard of us gush about Wolfe. He's one of the most awe-inspiring writers. So also, like our friend James Wynn from the Rereading Wolf podcast talked about on our first episode where we were discussing Wizard Knight, Wolfe came along with that book specifically, but with everything that he wrote, and he wrote these books that can only be novels. They're as close to unadaptable as anything can possibly be, because part of the magic is in the words and the deciphering of it, and in ways that you cannot translate into a visual medium, because it would kind of show you the mystery instead of letting you unravel it and sit in it.
It would also just cheapen it like a bajillion.
Yeah. For many.
My favorite Wolfe book is The Wizard, which we just discussed in last week's episode. Don't listen to it unless you've read this book. Read this book if you haven't.
Although in that same vein, it has been said that Gene Wolfe is unspoilable.
True. Yep.
He is in many capacities.
Close second for me is sort of the Lictor from the Book of the New Sun.
Yeah.
Absolutely adored that one as well.
Are we sharing our favorites now?
Yeah, favorite. What's your favorite Wolfe book?
Daniel's favorite is
my favorite right now, and it's honestly shifted several times for me, but is Earth of the New Sun, which is the sequel to Book of the New Sun. It in Gene Wolfe fashion is pretty frustrating, but when you really kind of give yourself to the story, it is such a exciting and evocative conclusion to the Book of the New Sun, which, if I could pick one as a whole, the Book of the New Sun is also just right there. But there's something really special about that sequel in so many different ways.
Sam, what's your favorite Wolfe book?
Mine is the second one, which is of Book of the New Sun, which is
Claw the Succeeder.
Which is Claw. Simply, I love all of them so much, but the one moment that stands out to me the most is when he gets that claw and he goes into that cave and fights those monkey people.
The apes. It's the apes.
It's
you
so
love the
awesome.
apes.
Something about them apes, man. Well, it's just like the power that unfolds there. Like, I don't like action really in novels anymore, like I used to, but I'm just kind of over it. But that moment just got me in the best
so
way.
good.
It's phenomenal.
It's actually it's the way the action is placed is so tasteful. The way that his ability kind of emerges in that moment is so fantastic and also mysterious. And then there's a giant walking in the mist, and you're like, what's that about? But it almost doesn't matter at all to what's happening, because the stakes are I'm gonna die if I don't kill these apes. But also there was a Leviathan walking nearby. It's what is going? That's why I think he's a great author. I am surprised that he's come to me so late in life, compared to all the other authors I love. But
I agree, but I'm also in some ways not disappointed. Like
I'm not disappointed,
in
but
some ways,
I'm disappointed in myself.
I feel like I'm ready.
About him.
I'm more ready for Wolfe.
I agree with that.
I kind of agree with you guys, but I'm also just just sad.
I see both
feel like I
sides.
wish I had known about this when I found out about Cormac McCarthy.
I'm mad that it wasn't being talked about more, but also really happy he's getting his due.
It's because nobody's made a movie. That's why.
No,
because
because
you can't.
Yeah.
You can, but it would be like
there is
terrible.
one of his series. Well, I mean, there's probably more than one there are some of his things that are more adaptable than others, but
Pirate Freedom, I think I've not finished with it. But it's fairly more straightforward than a lot of his works.
Well, and his the second series in the solar cycle, the Book of the Long Sun, is also it really isn't more straightforward, but it's more adaptable.
Right.
And he's also really hot. Like super sexy.
He's
Whew.
the greatest.
Mr. Pringles.
Mr.
You see
Pringles,
that guy's
Gene
face?
Wolfe. We adore Gene Wolfe. If you haven't figured that out yet, you're not paying attention. And then our second author that was everybody was going to have is, of course, J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yes.
I mean, what is there to say? The man started all of us on this magical quest.
The man is the god of the Godhand. Like,
the Godhand would not exist without Tolkien.
How could it? Like,
I think have one. Well, no, I have two. But anyways, Tolkien, and I'll just say having to pick just one book.
Unfair but necessary.
Unfair but necessary, and I have a very hard time separating the three Lord of the Rings novels.
Well, and they're really one work too.
They really are.
They aren't.
You have
but
to
like
separate
choose
them.
one of them.
They were
So
published
I'm
separate,
not.
and movies are separate.
I'm gonna go with The Hobbit.
Classic.
Okay.
As my favorite. This, I mean, it's a singular story. It's what got me into fantasy. Period. My dad reading it to us as we were kids. I have no idea how many times I've listened to the old BBC radio play of The Hobbit. It's one of my absolute favorite radio plays / audiobooks of all time. Yeah. And it's so much fun.
Yeah.
It's just so much
fun.
The
Hobbit's great. And The Hobbit's fantastic. And as a children's story, and it's just like perfectly crafted.
Yes.
And is almost it's like the perfect type of story for that young mind to be introduced to the world of fantasy.
Absolutely.
I don't there are others that are wonderful, but it is special for me. I mean, I think Lord of the Rings
Daniel, you're calling Steven a child here. He's
well, it's
I get it. It's like, I mean, it's great for little kids.
If you're a baby.
If you're a little baby.
If you're like a little whip.
So,
baby.
Lord of the Rings, I do consider Lord of the Rings truly one book, not three, even though they are published and split separately. I know that. I mean, I don't know if that's fair or not.
I consider it too, but let's not be all smart and intellectual.
And if I'm being honest, that is my favorite.
For sure.
That is my favorite work of Tolkien.
100%.
But
we have limited ourselves.
But I have brought the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
If we are splitting them into publications,
we must.
The Silmarillion is, and there is something to me special about the Silmarillion. It is one of my favorite works of fiction. It is unique and special as this mythic work that I think works in a way. People talk about it being difficult, but I actually don't think it is at all. I think people just mostly get into Tolkien when they're teenagers. And then if you read it when you're 16, it's like, what is this? This is so, I don't get it. But basically, like, if you can pleasure read the Odyssey, you can pleasure read Silmarillion. So yes, on some level, those are difficult. But again, because it's a translation for the Odyssey, you're probably not going to get a ton out of the actual text when you're a young person.
I would disagree with that, because in my 7th grade class, I did a book report on the Silmarillion, and I would use the Silmarils as part of my project.
Well, that's awesome.
presentation.
But I think a lot of people that describe it as being
13.
terrible. No, that's fair. Well, that's the thing. That's a great point. Where like that's an example of the book is talked about as this weighty thing that you can't dive into and that makes no sense. And it's like actually the beginning is a bunch of just so fairy tale stories of the world being created. And then it goes from there. It's like, yes, it is a history. And so you don't get narrative beats at that close level that you get in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. But there is a through line that I do think I read it once, basically back to back over not a super quick period of time. And something happened in my head with it, especially reading Lord of the Rings again in that same time where it was like, there really is like this special mythic thing happening in this story, especially when you tie it into Lord of the Rings. It's very, very special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, Tolkien's...
You should be like, I pick Lord of the Rings.
I mean, you guys are stupid. Have you read Lord of I mean, how dumb could you be? Have you read Lord of the Rings? What is this?
Have you not seen those movies, bro? What the fuck's wrong with you?
God, you guys are... Wow. No, I picked The Two Towers as my favorite.
There you go. Yeah.
Simply because it had Helm's Deep in it. And for me, it's very personal because that is the first battle sequence I ever read in a book and was truly moved by the oh shit moment when the walls were breached. Because I was like, there is no way to win now. I mean, and then everybody, we have Gandalf on a hill.
Of course. But you don't know that your first read.
But you don't. When you read it, you're like, fuck.
And when you're a kid, and you're not...
It's done. It's done.
You're
the
not experienced enough to know that, like, oh, well, we still have this much of the book left. Like, obviously something's going to happen.
Yeah, right.
You don't know.
That was my first moment reading a battle scene, and I was like, the wall's breached.
The good guys are going to lose.
It just really put me in touch with, like... I was really into it, so I was like trying to empathize with how the soldiers must have felt, and like we didn't have the special 200 elves that came in the movies in this in the books. We were just like, oh, okay,
yeah.
It was just the best battle sequence I think that I've ever read, mostly because it hit me when it did, and I mean Tolkien is Tolkien, but phenomenal. That's why I would put that book up there. Is that it took that, and the rest of it's amazing as well.
You also get Shelob. The ending, is incredible.
You do get the stairs, but pacing wise, it is.
And you don't get the freaking Frodo fake out betrayal from the movies. So I don't like that. But when it comes to forgiving Lord of the Rings canon mistakes, I'm like that one I can forgive. That one is one of the ones that makes me the most angry. Actually,
so
it makes me angry.
It makes me so
bad. But
bad.
I would pick that over anything they've done for Rings of Power.
I don't have.
Oh no! I mean, no. It's not even a comparison to Rings of Power, but I hate that moment.
That versus Sauron in time, I'm like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
All right. So those are our two authors that if we did not do this special segment, we would only be talking about three different authors.
That's our Guts and Skull Night.
So, yeah, I like that. Nice.
Actually, if we're making it fit.
I like that a lot.
It has to fit the...
All right, so for the...
which I don't even know if anyone gets. Like, this is all based on Berserk.
Yeah, and the irony being that, like, the Godhand is actually,
we did not say that.
Super bad,
evil.
Yeah. So, maybe, from a certain point of view.
If you research the Godhand... I don't know what you'll find, but this is based on Berserk, and the Godhand is apparently apostles that are the antithesis of whatever you might think is good associated with an apostle.
All right, so starting us off here for the pinky finger of my Godhand, we have Mr. Robert E. Howard, and I have through book club we all read the entirety of the Conan series. I have started reading his Bran McMorn books, and next up after that we'll be reading Kull the Conqueror. I know we've talked about Howard before, but I'm going to talk about him a little bit more. My favorite, as I've mentioned multiple times, my favorite short story and my favorite work from Robert E. Howard is his short, The Tower of the Elephant.
So
it's one of the best things I've ever read. period.
Like literally pause this right now and go read.
Read Tower of the Elephant. When Robert E. Howard, he did not live very long. We're all older than him than he was when he killed himself. Yeah. Yes. And he was unbelievably prolific, and he was writing primarily for men's magazines, which means that he was writing primarily short stories, and he was kicking them out. So that being the case, there obviously is a dip in quality in some of his stories. However, much like Conan the Barbarian himself is misunderstood and gets lumped into the modern 21st century D&D barbarian stereotypes of big and dumb, I feel like Robert E. Howard's writing is stereotyped as kind of that barbarian writing.
Yeah.
Where, again, he's writing for these pulp men's magazines. He's writing about these barbaric characters, so therefore his writing is going to be lesser than. Could not be farther from the case. When he was on, his prose, the structure of his stories, the action, the atmosphere, everything was so good. Some of the most fun I've ever had reading is the Conan stories, and that's continuing into his other series as well. And I absolutely adore Robert E. Howard and his writing.
Well, and his imagination is so, in my mind, underrated because he does write very masculine, muscular adventure stories. There is a depth of imagination in some of his writing, and I think his unwieldy creativity was hampered by mostly Weird Tales, who was rejecting some of his more out there and adventurous fiction because they wanted that sort of pulpy adventure story. And he was great at writing those, but some of the things that are a little more by the numbers were just because that was the market he was doing. And again, he's only writing short fiction. He's not writing novels for the most part. So that's where you end up in this world where there's a different expression of Robert E. Howard if he A, lived longer, or B, wasn't constrained by the format of writing at the time that we could have even seen a whole nother wealth. Which, to put it in perspective, I think Robert E. Howard is the American Tolkien, who has a literally on the level, if not greater, impact on fantasy. To that same, literally, I'm saying to the same level of Tolkien, and he died at 30, or 32, where Tolkien's first novel was published at 37. It's just it's obviously such a tragedy that he's not with us, that his mother's sickness led him to where down the road that he was on. But full disclosure, he's also in my Godhand. He is my middle finger because that felt fitting for Robert E. Howard. For me. My favorite stories, my Behelit. So I had three options, and I want to mention all of them. And then I think so. I really love this little 70s paperback called Worms of the Earth, which consolidates several of the stories about Bran McMorn. There are two stories in that, Men of the Shadows and Kings of the Night, that are just truly exceptional. And then we've not read that as a group yet, but it's a Cole Bran
McMorn story. So he's the king of the Picts.
But then also the Cole story, the Mirrors of Tuzenthun, is really just phenomenal. And it is Cole is a very similar but still very different character to Conan. And you really see in that story the different philosophical and psychological things that he was actually dealing with as a younger author that actually got written out of his stories to some degree. Again, in the Bran McMorn, you see his love of history, where like the Men of the Shadows ends with just this like pages and pages of exposition about the entire history of the Pict people for like thousands of years. And it, like I was reading, it was my jaw just dropping. I was like, what is happening?
Right.
But it's like, it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's very
You
very
love
cool.
a lore dump. So.
I do love a lore dump, especially, but it also is a lore dump that like totally makes sense in the story you're being told. But really enjoy Robert E. Howard. I've really, my appreciation for him has also really grown since I've read his non-Conan works, which I was worried, as he's known for that the quality would decrease, but it's actually the other way around, where not that his other works are necessarily better, but there's a depth in the rest of his stories that where Conan,
almost.
I think that it is somewhat limited by the popularity of the Conan character in some of the stories.
Yeah.
Not the heights of Phoenix on the Sword and Elephant Tower, but some of the ones in the middle, which are still fun stories. But,
Oh yeah.
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 Oh, cool.
Phenomenal. Robert E. Howard.
So I mean, we can go to Sam, but that was my middle finger.
Awesome.
Your pinky.
What finger was it for you?
Pinky.
Do I have to do pinky or middle?
No, you,
So
whatever.
which mine are not a ranking.
it's
mine
not
is
really
a
at
mine
all.
is a
Oh,
mine is a
oh,
vibe.
so
It's
this
It's a vibe.
this is where I turn the tables.
Oh,
Because I had an epiphany as I was thinking of this because of my very Christian background. When I think of fingers and hands, I think of the fivefold ministry, bitches.
oh,
Which they describe the fivefold ministry using a hand and fingers. You got the thumb, which is the apostle, the pointer, which is the prophet, the middle finger, the evangelist, the ring finger, the pastor, who's married to the church, and the pinky, which is the teacher, because he can get in. He can get in there. So if I'm starting with the pinky,
your teacher,
my teacher, and my experience, you ready for this? I don't think you're expecting it.
no,
Is Stieg Larsson,
okay,
who wrote The
Interesting.
Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series.
amazing.
Very cool.
I would put all of the series as, or if I had to limit one book, it would be Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, as the book that really got in there and showed me that reading can be surprising. And it's all down to one line he wrote in the book. And I don't know if you are familiar with the story or the works or anything, so this might be a spoiler. But he writes one line in the book that just opened the entire series for me. I can't escape this one line. I read it when I was like 22. And it said, "In that moment, the case started exploding for me when I looked at these pictures and was able to piece together what actually happened." And it was just so profound to see somebody write something where he's a journalist trying to solve a mystery, and then he's able to solve the mystery by looking at pictures that had happened 20 years prior. And it was really, really cool to see that written down and not witness it in like a movie or something.
Interesting.
And for me, that unlocked reading in a whole new level in like my early 20s. So Stieg Larsson, definitely up there for me in my God hand.
I love that.
Phenomenal.
I love it.
But he's the teacher.
He's the
I love
teacher. He's
I
the
love
teacher.
He taught me that writing could be fun to read. Fivefold ministry, bitches.
Fivefold ministry, bitches. Okay, there's the quote for the episode. All right, my ring finger on my God hand is Cormac McCarthy.
Okay.
I've only read a couple of his books. Blood Meridian is up next for me after I finish Lonesome Dove. My Baelet, my favorite is The Road.
Absolutely.
This book wrecked me. I've always been a fan of post-apocalypse, and I had never experienced the genre like that before. I am desperate to read it again, but also now as a dad myself, I'm terrified of reading it again. But no one wrote like Cormac McCarthy. He had such an utterly unique voice. Very sparse use of punctuation.
How do you
including
stop
no-
reading that book once you start?
I didn't. I read it in one
That's
sitting.
what I'm saying. I did too.
Yeah.
Like you can't stop.
I did the same thing with No Country for Old
Challenge accepted. I'm going to read it in a bunch of sittings.
You know what? I'm done. Page 1. No, thank you.
Men.
Good
One
night.
page at a time.
I
not
gotta
ready
go
yet.
to bed now. I'll read you tomorrow.
But I did the same thing with No Country for Old Men. I read that in one sitting, and interestingly enough, I would actually say that
I watched it in one sitting.
No Country for Old Men, the movie,
Stop being an ass.
is my No Country for Old Men, the movie,
Yes.
is the most faithful book to movie adaptation I've ever seen.
That's pretty
okay.
good.
It was
That
page-
tracks.
it was
I've not
page for
read the
page.
book, but that
It was
tracks.
page for page and line of dialogue for line of dialogue. They made very few changes.
That's awesome.
But he's one of those authors where, and it's doubly important for Cormac McCarthy because, again, with the very sparse use of punctuation, that includes quotation marks. There's no quotation marks in McCarthy books. But you always know exactly who is talking. Every single time you know exactly what character is speaking. Because he had that ability to write characters in such a way that they had such distinct voices that it was always apparent. And yeah, he's an S-tier writer and had to be on my list. He's not sci-fi fantasy per se. Well, The Road is a science
Road is
fiction
sci-fi.
book essentially. It's a post-apocalypse, but
Yeah,
it's the least sci-fi
Yeah,
post-apocalypse book I think I've
several
ever
of his are. So
Cormac McCarthy, big ups.
okay. So my ring finger. I'm also. I have two non-sci-fi authors on my God hand. And my ring finger is John Williams. And
The
my
composer?
no, the author. He's a '60s author, and my behelit is the book Stoner, which is one of my favorite books I've ever read. It is a book about a man at the kind of end of the 1800s, at the turn of the century, who goes into academia and becomes a professor. And it's kind of like, it's not a slice of life, but it's basically just this one man named whose last name is Stoner. It's just his life. And it's interesting. It's a book that was not popular at all at the time it was written, but that has become sort of cult classic's not the right way to talk about it, but it has become this beloved work in some circles at least. And there is a human beauty in this book that I have found rarely in other places. He ends up in sort of an intense and sort of failed marriage. And things sort of spiral out of control in his life, but with it being a sort of slice of life, most of what happens is pretty mundane. And then the book takes you all the way through his college years to his young marriage and to having a kid to on to later in academia, where his desire not to politic and his desire to actually teach students leads him to never advance in his academic career. And then it goes from there, and it really spoke to me. And then the ending, where it's his entire life. So at the end of the book, he does pass away as an older man. It is one of the most beautiful descriptions of a death I've read in any book ever. And there is just a depth of humanity in this book that is really, really, really wonderful. Moved so beautifully. And also one thing that's wonderful with it sort of ends about in the 60s. But then you've got this man's life from the 1880s or so. And not quite that late, excuse me. I'm misremembering the timeline a little bit, but you get to see him live through the wars and the massive societal change that happened in that like 50 to 60 years. It's not a huge part of the book, but you can feel that in it, which it adds a weight to it. But I really, really love the book Stoner by John Williams, and I'm gonna throw that on my God hand.
Phenomenal.
Stoners.
Yep.
All right.
It has nothing to do with drugs, but
Who's
Take
next?
drugs while you read it.
Who's next on your God hand, Samwise?
Are we doing ring finger?
Whatever finger you want, dude.
I'm kind of
Well,
working my way up. But.
if we do the ring finger on the fivefold ministry, that's the pastor. That's the one that's married to the church.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ, literally.
I'm thinking of reading more right now. Oh, Jesu.
Jesus Christ. By my faith.
They
By
say
my
that
faith.
so much.
By my faith.
Like,
This is the man I
they
love
joust
most.
And he knocks the man off the horse, and he's like, oh, Jesu.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So much.
By my faith, this is the man I love most for my ring finger. Ironically, it's C.S. Lewis.
There you go.
Hell yeah.
Mostly because of his empathy for
What's a Bahelit?
that. Well, my Bahelit would be the empathetic writing he has peppered throughout novels. So, it's not just one book. It's the empathy that I feel through a couple of specific
cheating.
ones.
Name names.
The Problem of Pain, that book.
Okay.
There you go.
A Grief Observed, and Mere Christianity. Those three things have a couple lines in them that are inescapable.
Sure.
Mere Christianity, if God is true, it's of the utmost importance, but if he isn't, then it's kind of silly.
Sure.
The way he's able to compare and contrast the human experience with these faith and philosophy things, I think are really interesting. And for me, that's a compelling argument, and that's why he's my pastor on the
Hey, you
fivefold
could
ministry.
choose. You could pick a hell of a lot worse for your pastor.
And he has got photographic memory, so that's neat.
C.S. Lewis is the man. I've been reading. I just read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to my kids, and we're about halfway through Prince Caspian right now. So
it's great.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Great choice. All right, moving along. My middle finger is Mr. Stephen King.
Oh.
As a former good Christian boy, I was very
not just a good boy.
I was a good Christian boy, and I had because of that, I had very wrong ideas of who Stephen King was as an author.
Yeah.
And I never admitted until I was a younger adult that I'm actually a rather large fan of horror, even though it was kind of obvious when, I was, before we were even reading them in school, I was on my own reading Frankenstein and Dracula and Lord of the Flies and all these sort of things. But yeah, I had a very I had a very wrong idea of who Stephen King was as an author and the quality of work that he was putting out. And I finally started deep diving in. I say deep dive. I've read a few of his books. I own a lot more of his books than I've read. And he's truly one of the greatest authors that I've ever read. Similar to Cormac McCarthy, he has such a unique voice. Such a compelling way of writing. He'll have chapters that are very long, page after page after page, and then the chapter afterwards will be a paragraph or a sentence sometimes, and it's still so gripping. And so there's just such a unique structure to his stories. My Bayolet for him, my favorite book that I've read of his thus far is Misery.
Oh God,
Misery is. This is so good.
Have you seen the movie?
I have not seen the movie.
It's pretty bad.
But
bad in a good way.
Yeah. I understand. This is one of the most tense books that I've ever read, and also I know he has said that he didn't intend it this way, but it is very much about his relationship with drugs. But it's also very much about the creative process and the writing process. And obviously it's a very extreme and exaggerated and horrific portrayal of that, but very honest one. And I was just utterly gripped. And I have yet to find a book that actually scares me. If you have suggestions, please put them in the comments. However, this book has been more tense and had me feeling more tense than anything else I've ever read. So I adore Stephen King. I love everything that I've read of his. I love his style. I love his voice. I love the characters that he writes. And for me right now, Misery is at the top.
That's cool.
I love it. So I've done my middle and my ring, but I'll circle back now to my pinky, which is Paul Anderson.
Hell yes.
Yes.
And he is a recent read for me. The Broken Sword was the first book I read of his, and it is also my Bayolet for him. But he is now in an author in this position because I've recently been in the last few months been exploring and longer exploring some of his other works. I considered Three Hearts and Three Lions as my Behel, as it is truly phenomenal.
I've just started that. It's very
yeah, good. And but just a truly masterful writer writing. Who's like, if you just go to his Wikipedia page, the amount, and I have not read most of these, but the amount of books the man has published is astonishing. Most of them sci-fi, a good number of fantasy as well. I've been recently dabbling in the sci-fi, and just well-written characters, interesting ideas. Has a really great understanding of science, and manages to compel them quickly and earnestly, and also like is something that I have appreciated more as I've been diving into works is a lot of brevity, where he's communicating everything you need to know in a quick manner, which is something that's great. He also has works that are longer as well, but absolutely love the Broken Sword for its use of myth and its mingling of sword and sorcery with both the Norse, mostly the northern myths, along with elves and dwarves and all that good stuff.
And a lot of the Irish and Celtic stuff too.
But some Irish and Celtic stuff too, absolutely. And it's just a great epic sort of tragedy. And if you're looking for something that's a good time and something that touches on themes that Tolkien were, but you're looking for it in a sort of different packaging, you can't get anywhere better than Broken Sword and Paul Anderson.
True.
100% agreed. I remember when we were reading that almost a year ago for book club, and just thinking like, how the hell have I never heard of this before?
Yeah,
how is this not in every single best fantasy book discussion out there? So read Broken Sword for sure. Sam, what's next for you?
So we're going down the finger, pinky, ring, middle finger. I'm on middle finger. Middle finger is the evangelist in the fivefold, and for me, my evangelist would be George Orwell. And
interesting.
Very nice.
Behelit there would definitely be Animal Farm, although 1984 is very close.
I was about to say I would have expected 1984.
I do love 1984, but when it comes to digestion and like just sort of the same themes and like what it kind of does for the world, Animal Farm, I think.
I dig this take.
On it.
I think this is a great take.
So Animal Farm for me was kind of my introduction into maybe everything sucks. and that honestly is what all of this is about, really. Like just a different take on the rosy, like whitewashing of any sort of societal demographic or outlook on life. Like, what if it isn't exactly as people's Instagram
What if it's just
it is?
all pigs?
Yeah, well, probably the premise for Black Mirror, like, but that silver lining there, that like there is a way to look at it as if it's all just a fake world, but inside of that, there's joy to be found if it's not. I'm trying to just prove that I'm a happy person and not actually being happy at the same time. So for me, that's what George Orwell was, which is why I would consider him the evangelist in that. Kind of introducing the good news to you that there is a happiness, but most what everybody says is happy is total bullshit, not real. So there you go.
That's awesome. I love it. Good call. Phenomenal call. All right, getting to my index finger is my oldest author, Mr. Jack London.
Oh, I thought about him too.
And specifically, my bailet for Jack is Call of the Wild.
Absolutely. Close second to Build a Fire, yeah?
To Build a Fire is phenomenal. Yeah. To Build a Fire is absolutely phenomenal. But Call of the Wild is, I think, the first like big serious book that I remember getting into. I think I was probably like 7 or 8 and found the audio cassette for it, read by a very young Ethan Hawke.
Nice.
at the Nolensville Library, and I wore that thing out, and it changed me. It's one of those pieces of art where obviously I was very young, but it was like a turning point where it was everything changed from that. It woke something up in me. It touched something deep inside, and it definitely affected my worldview, and it affected the art that I enjoy consuming from then on. So Jack London is one of the most well-known of the naturalist writers, which if you're unfamiliar with naturalism, it was the kind of late answer to the romance style of writing, where with romance, if it's a sad scene, if your characters are upset and angry and sad, maybe they're outside in the middle of a rainstorm or a thunderstorm or something, where like nature is reflecting the inner turmoil of the characters. Naturalism then was that nature doesn't give a fuck about you or what you're going through. And there's a brilliant part in Call of the Wild where Buck, the dog, our main character, has been bought by this team of city slickers who have no idea what they're doing. They've gone the exact wrong way. They don't have enough food. The dogs are starving. The people are starving. And it describes, he writes it describing this skeleton train of dogs pulling this skeleton group of people along as the sun is shining and the birds are chirping and everything's beautiful and spring is coming and it's wonderful outside. Mm-hmm. And so it's that where it's nature is going to do what nature's going to do and you're just going to suffer through it. And I ate that up. I still eat it up. And interestingly enough, I've not really seen anybody else talk about this, but I think that naturalism is actually the very beginning stages of grimdark. Where at the very least it's the same pattern of genre evolution.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I don't think that you have grimdark fantasy where again it's this kind of realistic
Fate does
fantasy.
not care.
Yeah, fate doesn't care. The world doesn't care. Good and evil are subjective to an extent, depending on your perspective. Mm-hmm. And nature is its own thing that you are existing in.
Sure.
That's naturalism in a fantasy world.
I've not read enough grimdark though, but in grimdark, are there like sunny, lovely, everything's beautiful, but then bad things are happening? Is that a thing, or is it still like, or is it like Skull and Bones? And
I mean, it depends on who's writing it, but it's the same kind of idea.
Sure.
Where nature and the world doesn't really isn't concerned with you, the individual.
Sure.
You have to exist in that harsh environment.
I'm wondering, and again, I can't speak on it, but it's almost like it's where naturalism is more neutral. Grimdark is maybe that bending of neutral just slightly into
maybe sometimes, but I think it still fits into the neutral category from the most part. It depends.
Okay,
again, it depends very much on the author.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, because I mean, I know the Game of Thrones books are considered in the oeuvre of grimdark, and there are like lots of beautiful settings. Yeah. Even though there's violence.
It's a great example of that. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, love Jack London. I have since I was a little kid, and will forever.
I love it. Okay. My my index finger. And this is a recent development. And I will keep working because I'm recently working through it. But my index finger is going to be Herman Melville.
Look at you, that's fancy pants.
I know, right? What? That's a Jack London adjacent. I feel like
we've got some classics in here
for sure. So then the Bayhillet would of course be Moby Dick. I am rereading that for the first time. I read it in college and I enjoyed it, but I don't really feel like I appreciated it. And going through it now, it is a book that I feel like, at least me as a young man, I wasn't ready to appreciate it because the book is freaking funny. It is one of the funnier things I've ever read. Really. And it has a wit and a humor, and it's also like a farce. It's like a parody most of the time. it obviously, with Ahab's introduction and then like the theme of the whale and everything, it ends up with this like foreboding, this thing sort of happens in the book, but the tone is bonkers. And there's like a chapter where it's like, we're going to talk about all the different whale types. The book opens and it's this whole thing of like the revelations of a sub, which is like a sub, like I asked a librarian for help, but it was a sub librarian. So it's like not very good. It's like, that's how the book starts. And then it's like, went to the librarian to get every mention of a whale in any book ever. And then it's like, the book just starts with whale quotes. And it's like, it's amazing.
That's awesome.
I know. And
now
it's
you're
like,
making me want to read it.
It's really good. It's really, really
There's a
good.
reason why it's a classic.
I was just going to say, turns out this great American novel is actually
who'd
pretty
have
good.
thought?
Actually really great.
Moby
Who would have
Dick
thought?
And Charles Dickens, they wrote good stuff.
And then you just like lots of the chapters. There are chapters where things happen. Then there's other chapters where the author is just the Ishmael. It's written in first person. Is just sort of pontificating on something, and it's really, really amazing. And then there's the whole thing with him getting bed with Queequeg, the cannibal harpooner, and then they're burgeoning friendship. But it's just goofy and bizarre, and it's clearly intended to be absurd and very funny. And I just like reading that as a younger person, it was like going right over my head. Is because again I was like, Moby Dick, this very serious.
It's big as a massive tome. It's big.
Yes,
serious book.
But it's like not. But that's. I mean, and it does end up there, in some capacities. But there is a lot more going on, and I do think my brain shifted on Melville because I knew Herman Melville was this big important author. But the Ursula K. Le Guin quote, "We love Gene Wolfe." She has a quote saying, "Wolfe is our Melville," and I was always like, huh, like. And I'd read Moby Dick, but it was like I couldn't like really thread that line. Now revisiting Moby Dick, it is really like, oh, like I can totally see what she means by that. It's really interesting. Honestly, I can't recommend it enough. I'm excited to do that and read some more things hopefully as well. Yeah,
Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
Sam, next up for you.
Well, I'm on the pointy finger now, which happens to be the prophet of the fivefold ministry, and for me that would be Kurt Vonnegut.
Nice.
Yeah.
No surprise, probably.
No,
to
he
you
had to
guys.
be on the list.
Yeah. My Behelit for him would be Sirens of Titan.
Hell
The
yeah.
reason I placed him as the prophet is I feel like he understood the human condition so well in the way that he could just make it all sarcastic, because that's the only way to deal with it. And still remain sane. So most of his novels will cover the scope of the beginning of humankind and the end of humankind, and that kind of like is peppered amongst, I mean, even Galapagos, we read that. Sirens of Titan has that too. Like most of his books have that element of like, this is how it started, this is how it ended, and then his famous quote, and so on. That's like literally his famous quote is, and so on. So like it's all just a bunch of bullshit, and like that's why I put him as my prophet, and Sirens of Titan is my definite Behelit for him.
I absolutely love it. All right, so my thumb. It's not going to give it to me. All right, my thumb.
There it is.
There it is. All right. My thumb, and this is going to be a surprise to absolutely nobody that knows me and to nobody that's been paying attention to this podcast, but is the one and only Glenn Cook.
Knew it.
You knew it was coming. And if I have to pick one, I'm going to pick The White Rose, which is book 3, the final book in this omnibus edition. The White Rose is probably my favorite of the Black Company books. Glenn Cook, I know I've talked about him several times. Get over it. He's the grandfather of Grimdark, which transitions nicely from what I was just saying from Jack London into Grimdark. And this was another one where I have very distinct memories of picking up the book. I know I've told the story before, so I won't do it again. But I had never read anything like Glenn Cook's writing before. It's all first person in the Black Company, almost entirely. It's the Black Company specifically is written as by the analysts of the company, and throughout the series, the 9-book series, there are several different analysts that are writing, and it's all in first person. And one thing that really stands out to me as far as Glenn Cook as an author, as a writer, is that he was able to take the same formula of writing, where it's all first person, it's all what is it, epistolary, where they're writing it as a diary or the chronicles of this company that are going to be read and carried by future generations of this mercenary group. But he still is able. You can still tell exactly who's writing it. He wrote every single author within his books has their own unique perspective and voice. And this fits in with a lot of the other books that I've mentioned. I love an author with a unique voice that can communicate his characters well. And again, he's another one where you know exactly who's talking, whether you see their name attached or not. And I love that. That's one of the most important things to me. And I adore his writing.
No, you even see that in Shadows Linger, where part of it is a story relayed by another character, and the way that is articulated is very different than the rest of the book.
Yes. Yeah. He's a phenomenal author, and one of the, as we've stated before, a massively underread author and underrated author. So read more Glenn Cook. Check out The Black Company if you haven't already. He's my thumb on my God hand.
So my thumb is going to be Jack Vance.
Yep.
Jack Vance. Oh,
Not read it yet.
The man, the myth, the Jack Vance. So this is also my Behelit, which is Soldran's Garden. That in this version is it's accurate. I don't know if you can see it, but it's more accurately titled. Titled Soldran's Garden. The cover says Lioness, which is the trilogy. I don't know why it's wrong, but it's supposed to be rare and special, so it's cool that I have it, I guess. But that is my favorite in the trilogy and of the works I've read. Although I will say, his novella The Moon Moth is really, really close, which is and also, like, maybe I should just talk about it briefly because it really encapsulates what's special about Vance, where The Moon Moth is a science fiction story of a man on a planet where they have no currency, but everyone wears masks, and your mask determines your status. But because they have no currency, you can only do what you have the clout to do. So you can get a nice mask if they will give you a nice mask because you have clout. And then it is the utmost shame to do that. And then not only that, to talk, you actually have to like play little instruments to speak to people. And so the story follows this outworlder who, because he has no clout, he's wearing this mask called the Moon Moth, which is like the lowest, dirtiest of masks. And then he has no ability to play these little flutes and bugles and things. And then there's all these special modes of address where you're supposed to do people. And then the story is him getting involved in shenanigans, and it pours out because he's not able to function in this society. But it's a sci-fi story on a weird planet, and then that's the stuff going on. Masks and bugling and all sorts of
wildly imaginative.
It's wildly imaginative.
This is an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
I mean, but basically, it's very like that, very alternate that.
What's that meme you sent me? What if your mom is made of batteries?
Black Mirror episode number 9. But no, so it's very fun, and then that story is very masterfully told. Soldran's Garden is the first in his Lioness trilogy, which is his high fantasy trilogy, which has that same imaginative, but it's a bigger scope, and it is a work that constantly surprised me, that mingled political intrigue and fantasy into very classic fairy tales. And again, I've still never really read anything quite like it. He manages to do to take a tone in his works that I've also found not repeatable, and I've read a fair number of his works now, and I can't read more of them because he's another author with a huge wealth of writing, which is awesome.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to diving into Vance. Woo. Excellent pick. All right, Sam, finish us off.
Okay, so
The Thumb,
which in the fivefold ministry,
Right, the fivefold ministry
is the apostle. He's the one that can touch all the other fingers. So he operates in the gifting of prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher.
okay.
So this is gonna be kind of weird and maybe low-key annoying, but I feel like this author has demonstrated this in all of his career, and albeit a disappointing one at this stage, but I have to put George R.R. Martin in there.
No, good. Hey, good.
He would be my apostle simply because he was able to craft a series that was so good that it made the best HBO golden age I think I've ever been a part of living. Also, to just crash and burn so meteorically and terribly.
Well, and
in the last two seasons,
crashing after they got past
his writing, and butchering his writing.
And to me, that's when I'm like, he actually. There's something to be said about how great that was, because seriously, if you had caught us in 2015, 16, we'd be like, there is no way this is going to end badly.
Yeah.
Like it got to that. It got to Sopranos level. Like, this is the greatest show that has existed.
Yep.
And it was like literally being written into other movies as like just like culture, like pin like points.
Yeah.
And so for me, I feel like he was able to in a way that Rowling wasn't able to, because she was like mostly for kids and it was like kind of a kid's fun story. He was able to get in there with every like sort of adult sort of mindset or outlook on life and communicate this beautiful story, this horrendous story, in a way that really kind of brought everything that we're into where it is now.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I don't think they can make a Rings of Power show pre Game of Thrones.
No, I don't think
Absolutely
so.
Not.
And it's not doing great, but like it wouldn't be doing anything.
That's maybe
at
a
all.
strike against it.
Well, it's
All I'm saying is the reason why sci-fi and fantasy and medieval stuff has taken its prominent stance is because of
Game of Thrones.
Martin.
Yep, 100%.
And Tolkien laid the foundation, but Martin literally stood on it and was like, "No, we're gonna make this relevant."
No,
now.
other than J.K. Rowling, as far as cultural impact,
like wizardry and all that shit,
the most important author of the last 20, 30 years is George R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
It's
Brandon Sanderson has to have like one good adaptation.
Sure,
to get up there
sure.
onto that
I mean, he's
level,
huge,
which I think is probably one reason that he's waiting.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I mean, I hope he does, and I hope he finishes
Obviously,
it before they try to make
more
a
recent
show.
Years, but Sarah J. Maas is right there too.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
She'll probably get an adaptation here at some point.
Seriously though, I wish we could have waited
huge,
like 3 or 4 years to let Martin finish it in a way that they could
have
done it better.
But anyway, regardless, excellent pick. I thought about it as well.
He's
Truly,
my apostle, yeah.
The five. Even if here's the shitty truth. That is a truth. If the series never finishes, there's still 5 of the greatest fantasy books ever written.
They really are.
Hands
Even
down,
if it
like,
ends with Jon Snow getting stabbed to death, it's
if
like
it just ends there, like, you know what? It's
that
unsatisfying.
was amazing.
But those books are so fucking good.
How do you ever make anything greater than the tragedy that was the Red Wedding? Like I remember reading that, and I would tell everyone I knew, like, as the show was going, I was like,
get ready.
There is an episode that's coming that will break television.
Yep. No, it's
and it totally did.
Yeah. No, it even knowing it was coming in the books, because I had friends that had read it before me that were warning me, like, hey, this page number, like, get ready. Yeah. And it's still surpassed. It was like honestly, speaking of Godhand, reading the Eclipse and Berserk was the only other thing that was like, I know some horrible thing is about to happen, and it somehow is even more horrible than I imagined it was going to be.
Like, yeah, somebody told me, but it's still worse. Like, the thing is, I can still rewatch seasons 1 through 4, and be fully invested.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Knowing it's going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I can still
No,
watch
and
it and be
then
like,
there
this is
wasn't.
awesome. Maybe Ned will live. He doesn't. Dang it. He doesn't. Rob,
It did though.
Rob might win.
I think we talked about this privately a little bit too, and this is the show, not the books. But I was thinking the last seasons, no matter what they did, were going to be rushed, and because of the shortening of the timelines, them not wanting to extend or pass the show off to others, there was no way around it, and a rushed show was always going to feel rushed. But I was so disappointed in it, but I really was more focused on that rushed feeling when it ended than anything else.
Yes.
And the other day, it set in that if they had just sort of vaguely happy ended it, it would have been fine.
With the rush.
It would have been fine, even with the rushed. It would have been like, okay, they kind of lost steam, but you know what? Danny and John got together, and they're ruling those 7 kingdoms, and Bran's the hand or something, and you know what? Somebody died, maybe, but whatever. They, Arya kills Cersei, and Jaime found some peace, and again, we saw some unfortunateness up in there, and everyone just would be like, you know what? Yeah, it ended a little like clunky, but I love that show. Everyone would be that way.
That's the thing. If you're gonna rush it, give us what we want.
And the thing is, like, because they were like subvert expectations, they literally kind of half ruined. They've obviously made the 3 Body Problem show, which is some good, some bad. I watched it. There's good parts, there's bad parts. I really do like those books, but I just can't believe someone would be like, we have to do this. Like, they literally like crapped all over their careers. They crapped all over their things. There's shots of the actors being like, what is happening? Like how it was so bad that it was rushed and the writing went down the drain. It really is like boggled my mind. Like, how did this happen?
How did we get here?
How did this happen?
It's absolutely preposterous. Like, and the fact that they, over 6 seasons, built up the long night, and it was one night.
One
and
episode.
Even then, it only lasted like 4 hours, and like the dragons, they just beat
and
the
then
dragon.
honestly, I will
and then
say,
Arya just came in and was like, I've been training with some blind bitch.
yes,
And
I did some victory.
anyways.
And
Pretty
not to admit that I recently, and again, we're so tangenting at the very end of this episode.
We're absolutely going up on a
I
tangent.
recently watched a video where there's a historians doing battle tactics thing, and they were like criticizing different battles. And again, some of this stuff is superfluous because it's fantasy, so it doesn't really matter. But then they were like, this is not historically accurate. But one of the funniest ones was like, in the long night battle, they're like, why are you putting your cavalry in front of your ditch against a horde of undead, one that's just like nothing, and then the catapults are outside the walls.
Yeah, don't think about it too hard.
It's one of the worst. It's like the dumbest.
Yeah.
It's so dumb.
Why do we have walls?
Honestly, I don't mind battle faux pas because it's like writers aren't like battle aficionados, so it's fine. But it's like but that's the one I remember seeing it in real time on the show and saw the catapults outside the walls. I was like, what?
Yeah.
They're gonna fire one time and it's okay.
Guys,
I'm
I
done.
got a
I'm
crazy
done.
idea. Let's all just be naked for the whole fight.
And on that note, this has been another episode of Under Towers Podcast. I'm Steven.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Sam.
And if you enjoyed tonight's episode, please give us a like, give us a subscribe, write us a comment. Let us know who's your God Hand of authors.
Yes.
Do you want to be naked in an all-out war fight?
Also, fan mail at undertowerspodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, send us your God Hand there. Send it to us on your YouTube
or
comments.
your fivefold ministry.
Or your fivefold ministry. Praise be. Listen to Hole Dweller. Listen to Horsebread. And we love you all. Namarie. We'll catch you on the next one.